Thank you everyone for joining us today. This session will be mainly discussing hosting digital rights events online, and it's available, and there's interpretation to Arabic available and sign language also on the Zoom link in that chat. So we're so glad to have you all today. I think we should start introducing ourselves. My name is Moussa Saleh, and I work with SMAX since 2019. I'm coordinating Bread&Net since 2020. Sarah, hi.
Hi, I'm Sarah Allen. I work for Mozilla Foundation, and I'm the director of Mozfest. I'm based here in London.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi there, my name is Nikki. I work with Access Now as the director of RightsCon, and I've been working with Access Now for almost 5 years now, and I'm based in Toronto.
Thank you. Trinh?
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Trinh. I'm the Director of Security and Technology with Team Community. We're the group that organizes the Internet Freedom Festival.
Great. So yeah, just starting directly, let's start with thinking of organizing digital rights events. Actually, we were doing this since last year, and right now we're an online platform speaking, like each one of us from his place. So I wanted to just give our participants and a review about the pros and cons of hosting a digital rights event and how it's difficult from hosting a physical one. That's what we used to do before. Just to start about talking about Bread&Net a little bit. We shifted online to hosting Bread&Net online or virtually since 2020, as all of you. Like organizing an online event, I think it could commence a lot, or like not a lot, but more effort, especially admin work, because you have to prepare the platform that you're hosting the event on, and that's so that you need a technical team that is well trained and experienced in these platforms. And you also have to coordinate with all the speakers and create a ticketing system. Even if you have a physical event and you have a ticketing system, having a ticketing system for online event is a bit harder. And you have to make sure that all the speakers are confirmed and they are on time, and you have to follow up with them before each session. Not like having a physical event, that you have all the speakers with you in the same space, and you make sure that like everyone is just in the same physical space, and they will be definitely in the session. So let me talk about this year. Like, we definitely have more capacity to have more speakers. Like we have more than 150 speakers, and we actually reached like around 1,000 participants in this year. Which is more than the whole 3 years of previous Bread&Nets. So like in last previous Bread&Net in Beirut was like our participants were like 350 or 380 something. So reaching 1,000 is something. But also like we're facing a lot of technical issues, especially with the internet connections from the participants or the speakers side, especially in Sudan, for example. Just last day we couldn't reach a speaker, or like this we had to we missed the session from Sudan because the speaker has an internet connection, and another speakers been canceled also because the speakers got arrested, and they're not available anymore. And that is a very less risky and physical event, because that everyone is with you. So I want to just get highlights from you about the differences between physical and virtual events, and what we are giving more our communities in hosting virtual events, and what we can do more about that. So I would start with Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, like I think the biggest and most obvious that you've just stated as we move from the physical into the virtual event is the greater accessibility. And for us as a festival, we were in London for like many, many years, and would have an audience of 3,000 that would come. And then moving online last year, it allowed us to increase to 10,000. So suddenly your community is greater accessibility for your community. There's no issues around travel, no problems with visas. People can come who've maybe never attended. And we saw a huge increase in the amount of folks that had never been to Mozfest before. But there's, like, as you said, there's huge challenges around it as well. You know, I think last year we really all looked for a way to connect and to like have that social life beyond our homes or our community spaces. And so there was a great enthusiasm for joining online, and everyone kind of was like trying to access and like have those like moments of connections. And I feel like there was great enthusiasm, but I think we're in a different era of the pandemic now. And I think how people are reacting to online events becomes another part and parcel of their workday, right? It's another Zoom room, it's another access, it's another link that you need to attend. And so there's an additional challenge of like, how do you give folks what they need, but almost through the methods that is they're creating harm around in people's wellness and accessibility. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. I was just handing it over to Nikki.
Yeah, thank you. I think, really similar reflections as you've both said. For us, the biggest challenge when we were deciding to bring RightsCon online was a recognition that we couldn't just copy and paste the space that we had built in person online. We really had to think critically about, in this new environment, how do we make sessions that are outcomes oriented, that are participatory, knowing that there are, I think we've seen a lot of greater accessibility. We have very similar numbers to Mozfest, so we went from 3,000 to 10,000 as well. But I think in the ways that people are able to access more spaces in an online environment, there was sort of a new wave of barriers that we had to reconcile that we didn't have to in an in-person setting. So thinking about like connectivity funds and a number of other challenges that we just had never had to grapple with before. So really thinking about operating in an entirely different space, that was a big challenge for us. But I think we've seen the potential of that space. I think, have really recognized, as Sarah said, there's a lot of folks who are just getting better at cooperating and coordinating in these spaces. And so we're learning a lot from each other, which has been a huge benefit. I think the sort of shared camaraderie between event coordinators and community builders has been really wonderful. And I think that increasingly, with people becoming more comfortable convening in these spaces, we're seeing a lot of like stronger programming and more invested connection. So yeah, I could go on for a while about the pros and cons, but I think those are some of the biggest ones for us. Like, how do you make this space adapt in a new environment? And watching the sort of community adapt with us has been a big pro.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nikki. Trinh, can you give me just some insights about your experience?
Sure. I think for those who are not familiar with Internet Freedom Festival, I think the best way to describe it is like it's a glitterific, full of glitter, community building, large festival. And I think we were really intentional at the very beginning, recognizing that the ability to physically connect was such a huge component of why we hosted the Internet Freedom Festival. And because we were not able to physically gather, we have seen that there's like, an erosion in building trusted relationships. And we knew really early on that we could not replicate that kind of magic that you can get in physical gatherings in virtual. And so we've made the decision actually not to have the IFF. And I hear about it every day, people asking us, are we hosting the IFF? Can we do it virtually? And we've gone a little bit opposite, and other large events is actually to make the intentional decision not to try to replicate online. Instead, we did a year-long and have continued to do year-long virtual gatherings in a much more smaller, intimate setting to be more focused and helping presenters and those who are hosting workshops to do that. And like Nikki and Sarah, said, all of those present the same challenges that you would get, in virtual spaces. We kind of just be able to stretch it out. But definitely paired with like recognizing the Zoom fatigue, the lack of focus, we also knew that even though we provided the platform for people to connect virtually, we knew that the cost for access will show up in different ways, right? It'll be either somebody, suffering on a time zone, because I know I've been on the brunt of like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. calls. There's just no way to have, a virtual event that is good for all time zones. There's that. There's the cost of the actual internet itself to connect, which is actually a lot of reasons why our communities go to Mozfest or RightsCon or an IFF. Being physically together is one of the best ways to meet and be able to meet companies and groups you're trying to sit down with and have that planning. And it isn't always that kind of best replicated on a virtual space. Like you don't get that physicality of being able to touch each other, be able to, draw on boards. And so that's a huge loss. And then of course, a loss of like the actual internet cost itself. Like it's been pretty difficult in places where the internet connectivity is so slow or is so expensive, it actually, becomes a barrier to being able to engage in these spaces. And then it becomes frustrating, right? To have to sign up for all these other events and then not be able to connect.
Yeah, definitely, Trinh. Like, I'm just connecting with all the speakers that I met before in 2019 when Bread&Net was in Beirut, and we were all like, you remember we met at the party, like we met at lunch at the in the garden and all this stuff. So, and we, for us, especially at Bread&Net, we insist on calling it an unconference, because it's basically we do sessions and we want to host all these sessions and we talk about all these topics, but we also want the community to connect and to meet and to network, because during Bread&Net, like if anyone of you attended Bread&Net in 2018 or 2019 in Beirut, like you always see, even when there are sessions running, but you always see people in the garden, in the whole room, chatting, changing emails, getting in connects between each others. And a lot of projects, a lot of research paper published or started at Bread&Net from people connecting together. Including or from that, I want to join to another point, which is creating a safe space and the accessibility that we mentioned, but not in a wide way. So like when in a physical event, you have this physical limited space, and you have all your attendees, all your speakers, and you can, let's say, you can control everything happening. But I think that's a very, very, very hard challenge in hosting a online event. And regarding the accessibility, I mean, definitely we give already offer more accessibility to more participants or more speakers to be attended, but also like the internet connection and a lot of other issues, doesn't make that accessibility perfect as much as we wanted. So I want to also hear from Sarah about that also.
Yeah, very much so. And I think you can look at accessibility in a broad spectrum. And I think one of the pieces is around connectivity. And I think we've all mentioned it, people's access and bandwidth. We discovered that 10% of our audience that was coming to Mozfest actually had lower than 2 Mbps of bandwidth, so would only ever be able to listen to audio. And so that changes the fancy platforms that you can use and the way that you want to maybe share art projects or share conversations or panels. I think there's another element around accessibility and around youth access, right? So many platforms don't allow youth to be online on their own, and we have a huge youth contingent that comes to Mozfest. And so, it made a very different and restrictive experience for them. I think another part around accessibility, and I think around the safety piece, is no one platform does it all, unfortunately, because you do want to have a little bit what Trinh was saying around the connectivity and those hallway conversations. So you look at different platforms and having chat like we have here, and different social platforms that can allow people to see faces and maybe happen upon, but they are links and they are other areas to be moderated, and there are other areas that people are exploring, and that's an onboarding issue. And I think that means the kind of safety watching where links are shared, how they're shared, how people are accessing people not coming in who maybe hadn't been registered, like is a big safety issue that you want. And you want to allow folks to be who they are when they come into a call, have what name they have, they want to share. Are they not comfortable with their camera on? Do they want it off? How do they want to converse? And so there's so many different levels of these access and these ways to communicate that it's challenging in this kind of digital ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, we're definitely also facing that because, you know, like in a physical space, we have the speakers, and we used to have, you know, like different signs for the speakers. So like the ones who doesn't want to be, you know, photographed or upload any video, so we can eliminate them later, or we don't record that session. And that used to be very clear for us all. And now we have to deal with, you know, like 2-3 Excel sheets to figure out if this session gonna be recorded or not. If this speaker wanna open the camera or not, or are we gonna tweet about this session or not? So Nikki, I know that you created, you know, just as you mentioned, that you copy pasted the space you created for RightsCon to a virtual space. Can you just give us some insights about, you know, how you manage the safety of this space?
Yeah, happy to. And I think these are really important aspects of the discussion about online events. And I think, you know, it was definitely something that we had to work on very quickly in our first transition. We transitioned RightsCon online in 6 weeks. And, you know, it's something that we're still learning and improving on. I think we haven't entirely figured it out. And I think that there are a lot of areas for improvement. I think what our approach has been when it comes to safety and accessibility has been really about like transparency and flexibility. You know, we're a big network that comes to RightsCon. We have, you know, in our most recent event, we had over 500 sessions, 10,000 people, and we put in a lot of processes to try to make sure that it remains a safe environment. We have a really thorough code of conduct. We have a privacy and participation policy. But I think we also really try to be very transparent about what we can do and what we can't do in our spaces, so people know how to operate based on their risk profile. And I think it's really important to us to be that transparent, because people need to be able to make those decisions about how they engage. And I think we wouldn't want to like misconstrue the type of space we're able to create. So I think being really transparent about our processes and asking for feedback about ways we can be better has been really important to us, especially in this online transition, especially as it comes to like safety and security. And then being really prepared to respond if something does happen, and make sure that we mitigate harm as much as possible in an online environment. I think we were all really trying to figure out how to be best prepared in case, you know, there was a Zoom bombing, or there were, you know, some sort of instances that happened, that would make sure that the impact of that, if it did happen, was very low, or as low as it could be. And then I think when, you know, talking about accessibility, it really shaped how we thought about our program. And I think for us, some of the initial steps we took were, you know, to Sarah's point about some people only being able to experience audio, or, you know, I think for us, it was thinking like, how do we make sure that content is able to be consumed in as many ways as possible? So how do we make sure that, you know, there are opportunities for people to watch things after they've gone live, or, you know, watch or engage on their own time. When we built the connectivity fund, we recognized, you know, there's the cost of internet, but there's also the cost of childcare or traveling to an internet cafe if you don't have internet in your home. So I think being really flexible about how people engage with the program and engage with the support levels that we provide was really important. And I think that we're, you know, recognizing and attempting to improve in a lot of ways around, you know, general accessibility of our platform, working with our platform tech change to do an accessibility audit and recognize the ways in which, you know, certain people are restricted or unable to access because of the way it's built. So I think thinking about how we create, you know, larger flexibility in terms of engagement that represents a wider sort of experience that different communities might have is really important. And then I think, you know, something that we've had to grapple with is recognizing where our program content also needs to reflect some of these conversations. You know, the accessibility community hasn't always been a part of these conversations around privacy and data protection and artificial intelligence that we're hosting in the program. So thinking about how do we not only be more accessible, but also make sure that the folks that have been working in these areas are really present in the program content as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Nikki. Trinh, I know that you created kind of, a digital community registration system to just keep people active among the whole time. Can you talk about to us about that?
Sure. I really echo what Nikki said about how do you be flexible around engagement, because we looked at, the different types of modalities or methods for people engaging with our content. And so we're so intentional about making things asynchronous, right? And also recognizing that simply just recording might not be great, although we do recognize that a lot of people who engage with our space do so through mobile. And so like doing a Zoom and then jumping onto a slide deck to play around with a collaboration whiteboard is always not going to work. And so we've really loved the responses to all of our asynchronous materials. So session notes or pre-surveys, like all these kind of different ways that people can engage with to submit things beforehand or afterwards. And then like you mentioned, we have increased our ability to have multiple touch points to each individual who engages with us, which while sounding like that's very easy in a virtual space, it actually requires so much more like hours from our staff, because it's not simply just emailing people, it's like talking to them individually, one-on-one, checking in with them. Very quickly, we had a daily check-in on our Mattermost space, and every day, people were talking about COVID, and throughout the year, you can see kind of like where COVID was traveling through in the different regions. And so that engagement was really rich, not only in data, but also creating that kind of solidarity space for people to engage with while we were kind of grappling with the pandemic. I mean, this is very pandemic specific, but taking the learnings from that was that we realized that if we dedicated more human hours in community management and engaging with people one-on-one, we were able to, almost replicate that kind of in-person experience of like, that really great feeling you have when you meet somebody in the hallway, you just have a deep conversation. It's being able to almost replicate that, but all through the virtual experience. And so that is year round, right? And we do take breaks because recognizing that there's a lot of fatigue on using any virtual or digital thing. But we did replicate into that model, we moved into that model rather than, not only doing workshops virtually every week, but it's also having a lot of touch points and talking to individuals one-on-one. And I want to note that causes, like while it's been really enriching, it's also recognizing that community managers and those who are organizing even in regional spaces, that is a huge burden on individuals as well. Having to be on point, having to connect all the time. So that's quite a lot. And something that we've actually seen is that there is almost a cognitive dissonance where if you are engaged in an online space so much, and then if you turn off your laptop and then having to experience, what is in the real world, because, maybe, in your location, things are going fine with COVID, but then hearing about your friends and them suffering with COVID or any, geopolitical events, it causes like, there's a little bit of a dissonance there. And so that was, pretty apparent, and that causes, that equates to people not wanting to engage online. And so in the last 2 years since COVID started, while we have had more virtual events and people have been able to engage more, we've seen such high numbers. We also know that right now people do sign up, but also don't, show up for workshops. That's important to recognize, right? It's important that there's only so many times where we can sustain online engagement. It does start to decrease, and it decreases for a lot of reasons. It decreases due to fatigue and not wanting to stare at a camera all the time and look at, 4 squares in people's faces. We've seen that as we are coming towards the tail end of this year.
Yeah.
So while it is really great, it's also like heavy as well.
Yeah. Just I want to continue from the heavy point. Like, we're doing all this heavy job, but I also want us to talk more, like think more about what we are actually doing. Are we really delivering the message that we used to? Are we doing our job as complete as we want to? Like, especially when it comes to the internet companies, and like bringing a speaker from these companies to discuss with them their policies, what they are doing, their a support team, especially for us at Bread&Net, like in our Arabic speaking countries, we face a lot of issues, and we actually right before the session there was a help desk session, and they were talking about how Facebook is not very good in replying to our request and facing issues happening to activists or even normal users online. So are we really doing that as complete as we want to? And I would like to start by Nikki.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really great question. And I think for all of us, these spaces are an opportunity to address like power imbalances in different communities, and to think about like who has access to different conversations and decision makers. And I think, this was a thing that we thought really hard about when we were planning for our second online event, because we heard a lot from people that they, I think both Sarah and Trinh have really covered, that like hallway conversation, that place to connect in person, to build trust. I think that's something that especially cross-sector relationships rely on, is that like in-person space. And we've gotten a lot of that feedback. Like, people go to different events to meet funders and try to influence policymakers and try to get a contact at the big companies. And so figuring out how to do that in an online space is really difficult. And I think we've, to my point earlier of like not just copying and pasting, like we can't just, host a networking event that's an open room and hope people will connect with each other. But we've been thinking really like what's our goal of trying to connect different community members with private sector, with funders, and try to redesign in an online space a way to do that. Like this year, we heard after our first event, people were like, I didn't know any of the funders that were there. It was really difficult to have one-on-one conversations with private sector. And so we did, in our next event, we did a social hour with funders and a social hour with the private sector. And those were like more intimate sort of virtual table settings where people could speak to the private sector. But I think it's something that we're constantly trying to figure out how to improve. And I think are really thinking critically about our role as like conveners and connectors to make sure that in the move online, the platform doesn't become like a speaking or promotion space for folks who have a lot of power and dialogue, and think about like how do we, more maybe actively connecting folks who we know are having trouble getting in touch with certain communities. So I think, it's not about like one quick fix. It's trying to figure out like how do we take a lot of the things that happen naturally in an in-person space. Like we didn't necessarily have to like put two people in a room together. But recognizing that we have a little bit more power in the like online space to be more active connectors, to try to make sure that we're not losing those elements of the in-person event.
Yeah, definitely. Sarah, can you please also tell us more about your experience at Mozfest about that?
Yeah, I think there's been so many changes over the last couple of years, and like changes for how we communicate, how we connect, and then that has been reflected in how we build the festival. And I've always seen the festival as this platform for our diverse global communities to come together and like be able to talk about the local issues that impact them at home, and have kind of global perspectives and support shared. And it became more of a challenge, just for exactly what Nikki said, is like you can't just put people into a building and hope that they're all going to connect to each other anymore. We have to like create these like almost digital stepping stones for people to find collaborators, find the funders, find the folks that they need to have the conversations. It's all about having a much kind of narrower focus on some topics, so that people can go to those sessions, and giving space for people to stay in those sessions afterwards to continue to connect. And I think what we see this year again is like what we built for Mozfest last year is probably not what the community needs this year. It's not. We know, like just what Trinh said, is like people are exhausted and there's the heaviness of being together online, and technology plays that role as part of that. And I think what we're hearing from folks is, you know, they want more space to like connect and less video time and different ways to have these big conversations, but the issues are still as heavy and as large, and the problems that they're facing are like even having bigger and bigger impacts. And so trying to hold that ecosystem for folks to connect, to be part of those conversations, and to be heard by those big tech, like that's a huge part of it as well. Is like, is the speaker box loud enough online when it's the digital piece, you know? And it's a hard balance to get, and it's hard to figure out, but I think it has to be constantly a reevaluation, huge listening moment for us as a festival, and just being able to be fluid to meet the change. It's like shifting sand at the moment, right? Trying to plan online. And I think just being agile enough and brave enough to move with that.
Yeah, just because we're like, we still have only 15 minutes left, I want to jump to our last question, and which is what's next, what we're planning next for next year's. Like considering all what we discussed right now, are we still, you know, like, are we very comfortable in hosting virtual events, or like we're planning in, I mean, yeah, it's obviously, the answer is obvious, but like, are we planning to, you know, try to introduce another types of event, like maybe hybrid, like, and actually we at Bread&Net, we try to, you know, like organize Bread&Net as a hybrid event this year, but like there was a lot of reasons that we didn't, especially what's happening in Beirut right now, like, you know, from safety and security reason, and especially the economic crisis that we're living now. But we're definitely thinking of, or like we try our best to organize Bread&Net as a hybrid event later for second year. But like, what about Mozfest, RightsCon, and Team Community? I would like to start with Sarah also.
Like I laughed when you said, are we comfortable? I'm like, no. I've been running Mozfest for 7 years, and it's never been such a different such a different need and such a different ecosystem. And so and it's a challenge in this kind of current climate to be designing events that are going to be impactful and give people what they need. And I think, you know, we just got that question in around hybrid events, and you know, I remember in, I think 2018, 2019, we tried a couple of these ideas when it wasn't a big stakes piece, where we'd have like maybe our facilitator in a different country and like connecting with folks there. And it was always really, really hard. And like, I know I have someone on my team who's a huge advocate for this idea of mixed presence. But for me, I just feel like, and Nikki talked about it earlier on, it's that being able to hold that space for that very important time when we have these folks together. Our facilitation needs and our facilitator leads have to be operating in a completely different way than when you would hold an event face to face. And I think we miss the nuances and the nods and the subtle understanding of what it's like to have a conversation face to face. It's different in the digital ecosystem, but also then add in that complexity of people who are not in the room, and the power balance is huge, and being able to maintain that, I think it relies on a different level and a different type of facilitation. So we're going to maybe attempt some of it, but it's not going to be a full piece. And we might do a couple of sessions and see how we go, because if we don't try, we never know. But I think, yeah, it's not too early to think about it. We're definitely trying to experiment with it, but I don't know if it's for us for Mozfest in March.
Okay, I want to hand it to Trinh, since she mentioned all the, you know, fun activities and nice networking at IFF. I want to ask her if there's any plans to introduce a hybrid model, or to try to bring these nice, fun activities to physical spaces anytime soon.
Thank you. I love this question. And Jem asked, is it too early to think about? And same with Sarah, it's never too early to think about, trying to go back online, trying to go back offline, a physical space. The things we're thinking about in our team is how do we increase or be able to fundraise so that we can cover the logistical costs of bringing people together. And we truly do believe that physical gatherings have so much magic in it that we do want to work towards that. I think the earliest that it could be possible is 2023, probably late 2023. And that's for a lot of reasons. It's because the global airline industry, the travel industry is still very much depressed right now. We feel like we can only hold a large in-person gathering if we can feel like the community that usually attends our event, the ones that have visa issues and want to have a lot of travel barriers, if we can get them safely into a place while also making sure that it's COVID safe. So you have to have nurses, you have to have testing, you have to have hand sanitizers, kind of like all the things that you need to have in place now in the COVID world. So only when we feel comfortable would we, attempt to do an in-person gathering. And then we would love to actually start experimenting with more smaller physical spaces, especially in communities that have that can gather. We want to be able to support that and then have that feed into the big international gathering that we're known for. But I do want to note that the future IFF is going to look and feel different, and that's accounting for the inequities that have been exposed during the pandemic. But we want to be able to address it. And we also want to be more intentional about the climate crisis, right? Like, does it make sense to fly everybody from around the world? A lot of our countries and regions are experiencing really acute climate crisis. Is it better to have more regional, smaller gatherings, that people can get easily to, and then have that feed into maybe a larger international gathering that does both, that does a hybrid model, and that gives. And we're really excited about that. We're really excited to be able to almost like not forget the past, but just like have a blank slate to start with. And that gives us a lot more creativity to work with. And we would, all of our spaces will be forging like new paths, new frameworks for how we can responsibly organize gatherings in the future, especially when we are talking about human rights and technology.
Yeah. I think you actually answered Abed's question. What are your expectations for the life after Corona or like after COVID? And I think our expectation is to try as much as we can to organize or host hybrid events, because like we got this huge accessibility online, and we can't let it go again and just go to physical events. Especially that I remember, I was a part of Bread&Net in 2019, but I was working only on logistics. But there was a few if you request if we can stream the sessions happening in Beirut online, and we couldn't do that. But now, like, we're online, we have the accessibility, we have the platforms, and we definitely can't go back to only physical events. Nikki, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I think, would really echo everything that you all have said. I think we similarly can't go back to a RightsCon pre-COVID. We had a pretty strict no streaming policy. It was very rare that we would stream, and I think we were unsure about what that would look like or due to the space and the environment, and also like didn't have the production know-how or capacity to do so. And I think we'd be hard pressed to return to a RightsCon where we don't have some sort of online element. We're thinking a lot about what it looks like to have RightsCon return in some aspect to in person. I think, similar to what Trinh and Sarah and, Moussa, you've mentioned is this idea that we want to make sure it's as accessible as possible, and that the two experiences, if it's online and in person, one doesn't feel like it's only reserved to people who can travel. So really thinking about how do we make experiences that are connected online and off, and where it doesn't feel like there's sort of like a secondary tier of participation, but that's not something we know how to do yet. And so I think we're going to be doing a lot of experimenting, a lot of thinking, a lot of consulting. I think we're really hopeful that, the community has been such a central feedback mechanism to us trying things and then pivoting when we need to do it better. And so I think we're really hopeful to learn from other community organizers, but also the community in terms of what they want, and really hope to, find a way to return in person.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, this year we tried, like on the second day, to stream a session that happened in our office in Beirut, since all the speakers in Beirut. So we managed to do that at our office, and it was streamed on this platform on Venuless. So yeah, if you want, we already started to test it slightly, if we can manage to host a hybrid event or not. But like, we definitely need to think more about the audience, about all the other logistics, especially if we're bringing speakers from outside of Lebanon. I think we still have only 6 minutes. I will just give you the floor if you have any other comments or ideas or anything to say that I didn't ask.
I would actually love to hear from the audience, obviously through text, if they've had good experiences already doing in-person events, or what are some of the things that they would like to see in a new in-person event, like other than hybrid. And we've gotten really great feedbacks, but for those in the audience, hopefully we can get to see some comments. Yeah, just like what they would like to see in a future gathering.
Yeah. Actually, also, yeah, we try to do that through a feedback survey. I think we will send definitely one this year after the event, so we can understand, especially that we're using a different platform than last year. So last year we used Hopin, and now we're trying Venuless to host Bread&Net. So we're still also, even we're online from last year, but we're still navigating. We're still experiencing platforms and tools. And we have another question from Abed, which says, do you find streaming on social media useful? Since we're not streaming on social media, like we're not live on Facebook or on Twitter or anywhere or on Instagram. But I think that's for security reasons and to yeah, definitely. I think Sarah would like to add something to that.
Well, I was just going to say that we do stream our dialogue and debate panel on Twitter, and with great results. It's been going now for 2 years, but I also feel that there's now this almost exhaustion as well on the constant streaming on social spaces, and so I think there's opportunity there, and there's like creativity to be able to design something there. But I also think, again, it's like one platform doesn't reach everybody, and that's the important piece.
Yeah. Nikki?
Yeah, maybe I'll just add quickly to what Trinh said. I think that there's a real opportunity here to continue these types of conversations. I don't think we were really hosting these types of conversations at each other's events pre-COVID, and thinking about creating more opportunities for people to tell us what's going well and what's not going well in these spaces. Like, I mean, ultimately they are for the communities that are attending. And so I think having, would love to see comments as well, but also continuing these conversations, because sort of, as Sarah said, this is like shifting sand and there's a lot's changing. And I think it'll be great to continue having this dialogue to see how we can learn from each other and learn from different events.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're out of time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And we still have one last day of Bread&Net tomorrow. Hope to see you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.